Welcome to Planetary Choices, a podcast produced by Center for New Critical Politics and Governance at Aarhus University. With this podcast, we invite you into our research lab, where we explore the key questions of today. We bring together scholars, policymakers, and activists who are engaged in sustainable planetary stewardship. Thank you for joining us.
Welcome to Planetary Choices. Today with me is my colleague Vladimir Pacheco Cueva, with whom I'll be talking about a quite fascinating and important new phenomena, cryptocurrency and the practices and political developments around it, economic and political. Vladimir is a political economist by training who has spent a lot of time working on, let's say, global governance from below. He's been looking at social consequences of resource extraction and mining, and recently in a project on El Salvador, which has been an example of new phenomena, new political practices and economic practices and financial adventures by making Bitcoin a national currency. That is Vladimir's specialty. But now this is, of course, a different kind of mining, and still he takes the bottom-up approach to it. Vladimir is a colleague of mine here at Aarhus University, where he's also teaching in the International Studies program. Vladimir, what made you go into the direction of studying cryptocurrencies in El Salvador, and how is it connected to larger questions of global governance after, let's say, a neoliberal hegemony?
Yes, Hagen, I started looking at cryptocurrencies, specifically Bitcoin, because that is my interest was drawn by the introduction of Bitcoin in the country in 2021, and I immediately started to see took the opportunity to see how that project what the impact would be on the population, because one of the claims that was made was that it was going to revolutionize or improve people's lives. So I thought it would be interesting to track the development. And of course, one cannot look at Bitcoin without looking at the international financial system, and also looking at the technology behind cryptocurrencies. So I started having a look at all of that. It's all relatively new to me, so I don't think I can be called an expert, more a student of developments, in this space. In terms of the financial implications, I also want to. I'm also interested in this space as a kind of a response to the crisis in legitimacy of the international financial institutions.
Yeah. So you do see this as part of a larger phenomenon, even though we're going to talk a lot about El Salvador and also your findings of this project.
Yeah.
What we're seeing with Bukele and the way he runs his presidency and the way he acts, is you see this part of a larger pattern of changes?
Definitely, and it has to do a lot with the crisis of neoliberalism. The project that started in the 80s, with opening up markets of all types, with deregulation of the economies, both in developing and developed countries. That mode of thinking has faced a number of barriers and collapses. The global financial crisis of 2008 was probably the last one, and it is no coincidence that that's exactly when Bitcoin, that's when we start to see Bitcoin appearing. So
could you tell us a little bit about those cryptocurrencies, because the uninitiated listener may think, well, wait a minute, you say neoliberalism has collapsed, but isn't cryptocurrency the El Dorado of neoliberalism?
Yeah, well, I wouldn't say collapse, but it is in crisis.
Okay, agreed.
And it is facing a lot of problems, and one of the things that we see is a lot of counter proposals. Yeah, and one of them is this. Coming from, especially from the what I would call the anarcho-capitalist or the libertarian streak of liberalism. So it is still within liberalism. Unfortunately, it's not a socialist or or any other type of response. It is still what I would call the right-wing part of liberalism. Yeah.
Okay.
These people have been thinking about ways of circumventing the state for a very long time. So the first attempts or the first ideas about creating things like, digital currencies came in the 90s. And of course, before then, you have the popularization or the democratization of cryptography. Yeah. So that enabled then people thinking, especially in computer scientists, to think about creating systems, digital systems that would replace the centralized systems that have been in operation ever since at the end of the Second World War, the Bretton Woods system. So to be able to use a financial system or a currency that circumvents the state. Yeah. Yeah. And that has a long history, culminating with the Satoshi paper, the white paper on
Bitcoin.
On Bitcoin, yes, and its creation, because that was just a paper, but then you have the actual system, and everything that has happened ever since. The initial deployment and the take up from those people who were interested, because at the same time you had the coding and the electronic systems. You also had what I would call a community of followers, of early adopters, or people who wanted to find alternatives to what they could see was a system in distress. Yeah, you have to remember that the global financial crisis was very it affected basically every market in the whole world. Yeah. One thing I must say is that globally, the cryptocurrencies market is still small, relatively. So, for instance, Bitcoin, the market capitalization currently is $4.03 trillion. If you compare that with, say, the smallest of the markets is the foreign exchange market, which is valued about between $4 and, depending on who you ask, $4 to $6 trillion. If you look at the total wealth in the world, or global wealth, is between 370 trillion to 400 trillion. So the Bitcoin market with its 4 trillion, it's relatively small. It's incipient. It's emerging. Yeah. But the reason why we're so interested in it is because it is a different type of market. It is one that's outside, up until...
Is it?
Yeah, that's right. Up until between 2018, I think, and ever since then, governments have become much more interested in Bitcoin.
Well, there's been a dramatic, they've been trying to get rid of it, regulate it, turn it in. China was trying to get rid of it during the Biden administration. There's been a harder take on it, trying to turn them into some kind of commodities or assets that they argued they weren't. And now things have changed with the Trump administration and with the Stablecoin Act from earlier this year, and more law to come. But I wanted to pick up on something when you say Bitcoin is an alternative, or but maybe you can talk a little bit about the technology and also about if it's anti-state or if it's the original dream behind it was something of a decentralized, anarchist vision of private persons able to trade with each other, independent of laws and regulations, but just based on mutual trust.
Yeah.
And that trust is guaranteed through the technology, right? And the protection of the data.
Yes.
That is it. How come that Bukele, who is arguably a president of a state, so how can he justify the usage of that Bitcoin? Is it because of the image that he gave himself as actually not being a state actor? He's not from the political class.
Yes.
He's just like all of
a renegade,
all of the populists. That he's coming from the outside. He's a real person and a renegade. And
yes.
I mean, how do you explain that?
So this is part, I guess, of a political trend that we see now with people like Trump. But before Trump, there were, many other politicians around the world, authoritarian, who were looking for alternative, especially in the developing world, alternative forms of market participation. Yeah. And this provided the perfect opportunity for somebody like Bukele, who wanted to engage with the global market in a completely different way, not through relying through aid or government to government help, but through markets. But we have to remember that even markets, for instance, Standard & Poor's will give El Salvador a certain rating, and it gives us so he even wanted to circumvent that, and this this provided the perfect opportunity. But we see it with other. There's a movement in developing countries for authoritarian regimes. We saw it in the Philippines with Duterte. We see it in Turkey with Erdogan. We've seen it in Brazil with Bolsonaro. Who come and they're thinking outside the boxes. They're not just authoritarian, but they're also thinking about different ways of engaging with the market. And many of them are at the same time, they're nationalists, but at the same time, they want to engage with the international markets in different ways.
Has Bukele ever flirted with the idea of joining BRICS or playing BRICS and the dollar system or the...
No, he's completely pro-Trump. Very, very close to Trump, and that has, with the further regulation of Bitcoin in the United States, that has helped him. That has helped his project, his national project in El Salvador. Yes. So perhaps, one of the things that we should remember is that the actual technology that on which is cryptocurrencies are based is a big part of it is blockchain technology, which I think is going to revolutionize a whole lot of things, because basically what you have is a way of making sure that every transaction is public while keeping the people that are making the transactions out of view, private. Yeah, that's one thing. And the other thing is that it's actually it's almost foolproof. In other words, everybody in the network will have copies of the blockchain. The network broadcasts every time that there is a transaction, and so it's fairly foolproof. So
it's because of this proof of work nature of Bitcoin.
That's right, and
that it stamps it in a decentralized way.
And the other big thing that they say is it stops Bitcoin or any cryptocurrencies from double payment, which is one of the big things that these libertarians are against. The state using the same money for different things, so inflation, and in their view, is impossible with Bitcoin. Yeah.
So we see Bukele emerging. When again did he become president?
2018.
In 18. So
yes.
good timing as well for the story here.
He must have had some. He must have known about this even from before. But anyway, he became president in 2018, and then.
But he's not only been the Bitcoin pioneer. He's also been combining it with a very tough take on gangs and crime and into prison and creating the Bukele model of an alternative state of not only providing you with, presumably, at least that's what the narrative, financial independence, but also security.
His vision of his developmental model is the Asian development model. You know, the one that basically says that the state has precedence over everything else. Economic development is more important than social development, this he keeps referring to Singapore as the model. Which, you know, and all of those countries in Southeast Asia basically relied on what we call the developmental state, where there was less emphasis on human rights and that sort of thing, and more emphasis on economic development. And so that's the model that he wants to emulate. And this is the model that now lots of people are very interested in, especially in Latin America. He's become a hero, and because of his, not just in Latin America actually, but because of his hard stance on the gangsters, the country, you know, mafia basically, and having succeeded in eliminating them to a large degree from the streets, then everybody's interested, or all of a sudden everybody's interested in what is he doing, you know. So that, together with, you know, these adventures, these financial adventures, has made him an intriguing figure, in the continent and beyond. I think that he has had more success with eliminating street crime than with the economics. Economic side.
Well, let's scratch a little bit on that surface, because there are many parts to that story. First, I would also like to hear about the project, the general project in which this study also emerged. But just to go through some of the problems that are, you know, happening with Bitcoin, is it his promise, if I remember correctly, is about, you know, making it available to everybody. So each El Salvadorian received $30 or so, I believe, and then he built Bitcoin City. He wants to build Bitcoin City, and he wants to mine Bitcoins close to thermal energy.
Use thermal.
So to use an ecologically friendly way of mining Bitcoin and all that. So he tries to really match all those narratives and challenges. And, well, what's your verdict?
You know, my verdict is fluctuates as much as Bitcoin does, because when he first started, I thought this is going to be a disaster. Yes, I thought this is a Russian roulette. So I was on the side of the skeptics. Of course, I've been proven wrong. You know, the Bitcoin, he bought $25 million worth of Bitcoin in 2021. Now he has $735 million because Bitcoin has gone up, of course, in those years that he had been buying. I don't know what he's doing with that money, because it's very difficult to find a public source that, or an available source that we can examine, that we can use. These figures that I have here come from the Bitcoin office, the country's Bitcoin office. I guess when this is the way I see it, is that it is easier to eliminate, for instance, gang violence. That's a project that may take, depending on what measures you use, between 1 year to 5 years. He did it in 1 year. But economic development requires 10 to 15 years. I mean, if we have a look at the examples in Southeast Asia, all the dragons took 15 to 20 years to achieve that rapid growth in development. So all these adventures are tentative at the moment. We see a lot of infrastructure projects that are happening in the country, but economic development measured in the traditional way, I think, will take a lot longer. I don't think we can claim that this project has been successful or a failure just yet. It remains to be seen. Just as Bitcoin as well, because there's, if we can see it this way, there's a lot of skeptics in the Bitcoin camp around the world, and there's a good converts. Yeah. So I don't think I can say now, it's going to be a disaster. So far, it's good. What my main problem with having made it into national currency, that was, I think, that was not necessary.
But they have moved out of it.
They have moved out in April this year. They were forced to move out, and that, I think it's a positive development. But at the same time, Bitcoin itself has become much more accepted around the world. There's more regulation and that sort of thing. So I guess what I wanted to say is that making this currency into national currency basically put the whole country in a risky situation. And this is what the IMF kept telling the country, the president, is you are going to, it's too risky. Yeah. So
could you tell the audience a little bit about the origins of the Bitcoin in El Salvador? It's not that Bukele came and invented it, but there was a bit of a original use.
There was a pilot
Bitcoin
project.
Beach? Or what
There was a pilot project called Bitcoin Beach where you could use Bitcoin to pay for goods and services. There were stores, all the stores in Bitcoin Beach received Bitcoin as form of payment, and it was a success. And so they thought, okay, well, let's move that to the national level. And so you could see things such as ATM machines popping up everywhere because there was an infrastructure that was created to make it possible for people to pay with Bitcoin if they so wish. Yeah. The problem is that what I saw, and I saw another problem is that the people were not informed or educated about what they were using.
So everybody got $30.
Everybody got $30.
Their phone?
Yes, yeah. So you could download the app. The app came loaded with $30. Many people just cashed it and never used the app again. Yeah. I still have mine, and maybe the $30. I don't know how much it's worth now. It must be.
Invite me for an ice cream.
Yes, so there's basically two camps here. One, the people who are really interested in investing in Bitcoin. This is it's a minority in El Salvador, just as it is around the world. Yeah. And there is a larger group who are not using it. Some people, a lot of them are basically just not interested in this as a form of investment or as a financial instrument. And then there is a minority within that group who are against it ideologically. Just as you have a camp, you have also two camps within the Bitcoin. Which are I call them ideological entrepreneurs, who are, the anarcho-capitalists and the libertarians who think that this is This is the
This
best
is going
thing.
to bring down the deep state.
Yeah, and the pragmatists, the pragmatic entrepreneurs who basically want Bitcoin to grow, regardless of the type of negotiations you make with the state and that sort of thing. Yeah, that camp has basically won. The
pragmatists.
The pragmatists. They Bitcoin is now much more accepted and regulated, and the big banks are continuously finding ways of work with Bitcoin, and the cryptocurrencies. Yeah. So here you have two camps, and I think that the reason why I wanted to look at El Salvador is a fairly marginal place, in world politics, but you can almost see that happening, that being echoed around the world, where you have people who are interested in this as an instrument and they use it. I think you've told me about this story of this woman, or there's a story about this woman in Afghanistan.
Yeah, there was a female entrepreneur who paid her female employees in Bitcoins or Satoshis, maybe not a full Bitcoin. And when the Taliban regime came back, they could pocket their ledgers and move to another country, and they would have financial freedom.
That's right, yeah. Which is very different to, I years ago I heard the story about these refugees from Iran who transferred, basically sold all their assets in Iran. This is, with the Shah of Iran, the fall of it.
Yeah.
They sold everything, bought gold, and then traveled with gold. But of course, gold is easy to lose and easy to steal, and they were victims of crime, so they lost a lot of their wealth in leaving Iran. So the same cannot happen with Bitcoin because it's all, safely secure in the virtual world. Yes.
Unless you lose your
unless you lose your key.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, which has happened. So you have this group, and then you have the majority who are not interested in this, and there are also, I would say, as Bitcoin becomes more and more prevalent, there will be people who will be against it. Partly on ideological grounds, partly on the idea that one of the things that happened in El Salvador is that they were connecting it to crime. I don't know whether people are going to think the same thing, that this is connected to international crime, or to hiding money or evading tax, or, in other words, using...
I see what you mean. Some people would argue that the crypto world has gone through this kind of crisis of trust, and what happened in 21, 23, these dips, and with also big frauds and big I've forgotten the name of the
OneCoin, yes.
Yes,
WorldCoin, I think it was called.
Yes, but also this whole exchange, I think it was FX.
Oh yes.
Just with Bankman-Fried fraud, it all blew up, and so some would argue that now also the what's the Binance? Yes, the head of Binance, he was fined with a lot of money and had to pay the biggest fee, I think, in American history, because of what he did with Binance. So some people would argue that now the industry is through, and it has weeded out all the bad guys. Regulation is coming, so it's secure. But let's stay in El Salvador and maybe try to zoom out again after your findings. So we look at El Salvador, we look at new financial practices in a new or let's say idiosyncratic political system. President with a base cap, playing all sorts of tricks. How do you see El Salvador moving in throughout the next 5 years, and what kind of conclusions do you draw, generally speaking, to let's say global governance or global South movements?
So I think that what is happening in El Salvador, like I said to you, is this divide. I think this is going to be repeated again, and it's going to be replicated around the world. This divide between the ones who engage with Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies and the ones that don't. I don't think that having cryptocurrency in the country does much for developmental purposes.
No.
I think that, I mean, as a form of payment, yes, but as a store of value, I was, you know, I'm always reminded about the uses of money, store of value, form of exchange, and a unit of account. It does really well, increasingly well, as a store of value.
Yeah.
But the other two are not very good. You know, it's very volatile, and therefore, as a unit of exchange, it will have these problems. And what I mean by that is that in El Salvador, the presence of Bitcoin will not easily transfer into economic development unless the president or the authorities do something with that money coming into the country. Yeah. One of the first things that I thought could have been done is, you know, El Salvador is one of the biggest recipients per capita of remittances. I thought, you know, it would be very, very advantageous for the government to channel most of those remittances through the wallet that was created, you know, for people, and to make it a free transfer. Yeah. Then the government could keep this reserve for a short period of time, say, you know, 5 days, use the money, and then give the recipient the money that they were sent. Yeah. People will save the exchange, the cost of sending the money, and the government could keep some money, you know, from this transfer. But nothing like that has happened. They're more interested in attracting attracting Bitcoin entrepreneurs to the country and showing that they mean business when it comes to you know, taking Bitcoin seriously. So I don't see in the next 5 years nothing much happening. Perhaps, you know, it all depends on whether
will Bukele still be in power?
Well, he changed the constitution so that
right?
he can continue being president, re-elect himself, re-elect, you know, so that he could be re-elected in the future. This is a feature of many of these, you know, authoritarian regimes. Yeah. So he may be president. If he's not president, there may be a figure there that he has control over. Yeah.
Okay. I would also be interested in, because you mentioned foreign investors, or let's say the investor class in the United States and around the world. How about El Salvadorian entrepreneurs, or let's say the middle class, or the those who would do business and would be playing an important role in the economy?
So the middle class, a fraction of the middle class has taken this up, you know, welcome the opportunity. But large parts of it are not interested. They just don't understand, you know, what a cryptocurrency is. It is too esoteric for them. Yeah. And, you know, the government hasn't made any concerted effort to educate people on what this is. Yeah. So those who have taken it up in the middle class is because they've done the research, they've done their homework, and they go, okay, let's have some savings in here. But by and large, most of them, I can set a you know, we did a survey, and the results from our survey basically coincided with a survey that was carried out by the Chamber of Commerce. So February 2022, so that's almost a year after it was introduced, indicates that 13.9, almost 14% of businesses have made sales in Bitcoin. So only, I don't know, that figure hasn't grown. It is still marginal. If they were asked, what will you do when you receive Bitcoin? This is from the Chamber of Commerce. What will you do when you receive, the $30, the incentive? Most of them, 53% of businesses and 52% of individuals said that they'll change it for US dollars and they will use it for their everyday expenses. Whereas investment, those who would invest were 6% and 9%. It's a very small percentage of the population are doing what you're supposed to do with it. Most of them basically would just spend it, and that's what they did. So it hasn't made the impact that you would expect, from
well, as you said yourself, economic changes take 10, 15 years.
It takes a long time.
Now we're at year 5 or something, or year 3 of the introduction of Bitcoin.
Yes.
And
so the problem, I think, is the fluctuation. And the other problem is the lack of knowledge about it. So if you say, for instance, you're not educated into Bitcoin and you look at it from the outside, you see this asset that goes up and down, you're probably going to say, no, I don't. But if you are educated into, all these fluctuations in whatever you do, if you invest in the stock market, it's the same thing. And you have a long-term strategy, then of course you would do it. But the proportion of people doing that is very small.
I see.
Yeah. So, and I think it will remain more small because it's like I said to you, it's an esoteric. Learning everything that it will make it a popular or people's investment option is it's very small.
Until probably you just have it on your phone and pay everything.
Unless, and this is what,
intuitively through an app or something.
Yes, As a form of payment, I think it works. Well, As a store of value, it's a completely different thing, especially for people here. They were making jokes, for instance, when it was introduced, they were saying, people come into a restaurant and people would ask, how much is this meal? That's so many Bitcoin. At the end of the meal, the price would usually go up, and they say, "Why is it this many more Bitcoin?" Oh, it just fluctuated while you were eating. And it is true. I mean, so people in that joke, people were catching up that this thing goes up and down. What one of the people that I talked to said is, as soon as they give me the money in Bitcoin, I transfer it to the US dollars.
I see.
Yeah. So in the wallet, they could transfer the money into as soon as they got it. So they didn't wait
to be on the safe side.
That's right, to be on the safe side. They didn't like this. Yes, of course, it could go up, but you never know.
The risk is too high.
Yeah, the risk is too high, and the needs, the needs of you have to remember that this is a poor country, so the needs are immediate. Waiting for a year, you may be
having an investor's mentality. Putting it on the mid or long term is not everybody's possibility.
That's right. Yes. Yeah.
I see.
So this is even though the barriers of entry are the entry barriers are very low, because you can, with $1 you can already become an investor, and using an app that's given by the government, that's free, and all of these things. Despite those things, people don't have that long term. and I'm not blaming them. I think that even if you had a lot of education, people will still be resistant to it. And I think that the same would happen in many other countries. So this is, I guess, looking at El Salvador is kind of like an experiment. That's something of what may happen around the world.
So, Vladimir, what are your now preliminary conclusions about what is going on in El Salvador and with the Bitcoin experiment?
So, I think that, of course, it's an alternative, form of investment. I think that it will remain the domain of a minority. I don't think it's going to, and it is going to be popularized.
Maybe as a final thought experiment, if Bukele were not president anymore, but some form of democratically elected parliament comes back, voted in maybe by this middle class that is uninformed or uninspired, would they keep the Bitcoin?
They will keep the Bitcoin. I mean, the infrastructure is there. They will keep it, yes. So in that sense, it's an addition to everything else going. They may actually do the right thing and educate people. In other words, try to get everybody to. I think they would keep it because as in like I said to you in April this year, it stopped being national currency. Is now just an investment like any other. So it doesn't matter in that to the state. It will not make any difference to the state coffers. It doesn't impact the credit rating of the country, so it will probably stay as an institution. Obviously, from the figures, they've done really well.
Yes, it's astonishing.
Yeah, yes. The initial investments that the money that he put in is now made a whole lot of money.
So I think we're coming to an end slowly. Are there any last words that you would like to formulate?
Yeah, I think when it comes to global, there's one thing that I wanted to add, and it's the consumption, the energy consumption.
Yes, of course.
Because this is a planetary and also a governance aspect to it. So I was looking at the figures, for how much energy is consumed, how much energy Bitcoin consumes, and of course this doesn't include all the other cryptocurrencies. So Cambridge runs this project called the Cambridge Bitcoin Electricity Consumption Index, where they're trying to figure out how much electricity is used in the whole process of producing Bitcoin. And it's quite significant. It stands at 175 terawatt hour, which, if you compare with other industry, for instance, here we can see copper production. It's 167. And copper production is an industrial process. It requires a lot of energy. All the fridges in the US consume 104 terawatt hour. So Bitcoin consumes way more. AC air conditioning is the highest, 2,159. And if you annualize that, for instance, when you compare it with gold, is something like 175 terawatt hour compared to Bitcoin, which is about 250. So it is quite considerable, So what this means globally is that the one thing that people see as an alternative form of finance is the one thing that is adding to our woes when it comes to carbon footprint. Yeah. And the more of these things that come up, because it is a market, it's a market response to a crisis. So people are trying to get out of a sinking boat, going into other ones that are just making the problem worse. So this is an individual response to a major problem, a major crisis. It's not going to solve the problem. It's exacerbating it. Yeah.
So the final conclusion is actually, well, they may have done well with the regarding the numbers and the investment, but the externalities or the costs of it from an environmental perspective are disastrous.
Yeah, disastrous, yes. Yeah. So or adding to an already bad situation. Yes. And I think this is the problem with market-led solutions, and technological solutions to a political, social, economic problem, such as the carbon footprint, is you create an alternative and then it creates a new problem. So such an electric cars, of course you don't use fossil fuels anymore, but then you mine the lithium. And then that becomes a new problem. What are we going to do when we have to dispose of these batteries, or when we have to renew these? That is something that we're going to face in the next few years.
Thank you, Vladimir. We'll be talking to you then in a couple of years again.
Yes.
Thanks, Vladimir. Thanks for joining Planetary Choices. We've learned a lot about this case, taking away some of the myths about Bitcoin and seeing it in actual practice. The message is mixed. There's some upside, but also a lot of depressing news and consequences that need to be tackled. Stay tuned.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Planetary Choices. This podcast is produced by the Center for New Critical Politics and Governance at Aarhus University. Visit our website and join us for another episode of Planetary Choices.
That was it.